Come out, Jack. We both know how the story ends. I would not be so sure about that. Only one walks out of here, and it sure as hell won't be you. Ever ask yourself why it's always like this? Because there's only one truth. And who decides which truth is the one?
The one who stays.
Then I suppose we'll meet again, won't we, Jack? Seems like we are gonna meet again, Jack.
And the devil set me free. Set me free.
In this video, I'll walk you through the full workflow of how I made this film, from idea to cover design. Enjoy.
The slow-burning Western short film you just watched took me about 5 evenings, each about 3 to 4 hours long, plus a full Saturday to finalize the concept. I won't go deep into how each tool works. They're already covered elsewhere in the course or have their own manuals and tutorials. It'll be a long video, but packed with insights and specific solutions to some challenges along the way. Here is a full workflow breakdown of the process. Concept creation, script writing, image generation, mostly through Flux Context in Weavy, video generation, mostly VEO3, music generation in Suno, sound design, changing the aspect ratio, upscaling in Astra to 4K, cover design. But as always, the devil's in the details. So let's walk through each of these steps, one by one.
My first step was creating a concept. Here is my process.
I decided to try creating a film in the style of a Western. To prepare, I rewatched many iconic scenes from classic Westerns. I really wanted to make a small shootout scene with a clear setup, one protagonist, one antagonist, and the tension between them. My goal was to focus on character and scene consistency, minimal dialogue, and tension. After reviewing dozens of Western clips on YouTube and recalling classic Westerns, I identified a few key stylistic elements: CinemaScope aspect ratio of 2.39 to 1, minimal lines of dialogue, extreme close-ups on eyes and mouths, and a heavy reliance on long, drawn-out tension that is suddenly resolved by a shootout. Of course, the typical Western ends with the hero shooting everyone and walking away victorious.
No more Mr. Knife Guy.
But I wanted to go a bit deeper, to add some mystery and offer a personal, philosophical take on the eternal battle between good and evil, between various truths and some flavor of mystery behind it. A kind of conceptual, philosophical shootout, packed into a short, 2-minute Western. That's when I started forming the core idea and sketching some dialogue and narrative.
Now let's talk about the script.
Once I had the concept of a philosophical Western, a meeting between a hero and an anti-hero, I knew I wanted to leave the ending open. The audience wouldn't know for sure who's who. That mystery was important to preserve. I intentionally avoided exposition in the dialogue. I wanted a more mythical, meta-level communication between the characters, so when I started writing the script, I focused mainly on the dialogue. The setting is a random, abandoned Western town. The protagonist confronts an enemy he seems to meet again and again. The line,
Ever ask yourself why it's always like this?
it made things more eternal. The script kept changing during production, which is often the case with AI films. Not everything you envision can be executed exactly, and so the script was born.
My next step was generating consistent characters in consistent environment, and let's check out the process for it.
At this point, I had my idea and concept. I asked ChatGPT to describe both the hero and the villain. It gave me great descriptions that I liked right away. By the third generation in Midjourney, I had characters I wanted to use. Midjourney also helped me sketch out a visual feel for the Western environment. But for true consistency between shots, Midjourney alone wasn't enough. That's where Wevy.ai came in, a tool similar to Comfy UI that uses a node-based structure and includes most of image and even video generators, tools to edit images, etc. You could also use OpenArt, FreePic, or other tools for image and video generation, but I chose Wevy for everything that followed. Using built-in tools like image generators, in-painting, out-painting, flux context, magnific upscaler, I was able to construct the exact shots I needed. Sometimes I needed Photoshop for additional tweaks. Wevy gave me flexibility. If one tool failed, I just used another. As you can see, it's a rather chaotic board. Using Wevy and the Flux Context tool, I dropped in images of my main character, the villain, and the scene. I began generating various shots to see how they would look, and surprisingly, Flux Context handled it very well. I was immediately inspired by how you can place characters into scenes. Typical workflow would consist of creating a shot through either Flux Context or Flux Multi-Image, then upscale it right here with Magnific. On this stage, I was getting lots of details and proper image resolution, but was losing face coherence. So next step was to make a face swap to fix this issue. It was not perfect, but did the job. And then making final edits, either in Photopea, right inside Weavy. Like here, I removed these unnecessary strange gadgets from his body, or simply download the image and edit it in Photoshop. I created a similar branch for building out my anti-hero. Some shots, like the one where the hero enters frame with just his feet, was originally generated by Flux Context Multi-Image as a close-up shot, with fit present in the shot. Then, by using inbuilt masking through Painter module, I masked out the legs and used Flux Fill Pro and a simple prompt to erase legs from the shot. I later used a bit of Photoshop to mask the incoherences on the edges of the mask. This gave me a before and after frame, which I then used for video generation as the two frames for the entrance scene. Once I found a suitable fragment, I used it right away. So, by using Flux Context Multi-Image, Magnific Upscaling, Face Swap, and various in-painting edits, I was able to build the frames I needed from different angles. And occasionally I do extra edits in Photoshop to tweak certain details or simplify areas.
Now let's talk about video generation, the fun part, the juicy part, the part where static shots turn into movies.
After I completed the first batch of scene frames, I decided to test how well video generation works. About 90% of the shots used here were made in VO3, because VO3 introduced a groundbreaking new feature: the ability to add sound to images, even if they're inserted from other sources. This was a revolutionary update. Previously, we could only do text to video with audio. Now we can do image to video with sound. With minimal adjustments, we can assign a specific voice to a character, and it stays consistent across all generations. And I was really impressed with the results.
Come out, Jack. We both know how the story ends. Only one walks out of here, and it sure as hell won't be you.
Let's go over the key scenes in more detail. The first frame, a rusty windmill. Pretty straightforward. It spun, with rusty sound included, exactly what we needed. Next was the scene of the main character entering. First, I created the base image. You may remember I edited it, producing a before-after pair. As of recording this video, we can't use VO3 for the first frame and last frames, so I used VO2, and it was just fine. The following frame, where the character looks around, he happens to land naturally on his left foot, which matched perfectly with the end of the movement. A simple frame where I described the character scanning the area for the enemy. as if aware that someone was nearby. I liked that frame so much that I wanted to extend the moment where the character looks around. I added this scene into Scene Builder and switched to VO2, because VO3 doesn't yet allow extensions. It worked flawlessly. VO extended the shot without a hitch. The character slightly opens his mouth, a minor glitch that's hard to fix since VO often opens mouths by default. But the extension worked great. At the point where he fixates on one spot, I inserted the Raven shot. After that was another frame where the character scans his surroundings again. It's the opposite side of the street, later upscaled and magnific, which added a ton of detail. He's still scanning the area in that shot, but I had to use Kling for this one because VO absolutely refused to keep the camera still. Next we get to the first bit of dialogue.
Come out, Jack. We both know how the story ends.
Here it was crucial to use the right prompt to specify both the character's voice and his facial expression.
Come out, Jack. We both know how the story ends.
Afterward came the villain's entrance. Again, the original shot was already generated with the legs in place. Then I removed the legs using the in-painting tool. I animated his legs stepping into the frame. It took multiple attempts, not a simple task, but one of the takes turned out good enough to use. And as you can see, the movement also starts very successfully with a slight swaying of the cloak. This happened automatically during generation, which nicely suggested that it was him stepping into the shot. Then there's a slight zoom in, which again wasn't in the prompt, but that's totally fine. It worked beautifully. Then using the same voice prompt for the same character, his movement animation happened automatically. He stepped forward, leaned in slightly, and said,
Only one walks out of here, and it sure as hell won't be you.
And from there, everything turned into a back and forth exchange between the characters. Line by line by line, a kind of verbal standoff, with close-up shots that kept getting tighter and more intense. Quick side note, pay attention to how beautifully VEO handles acting. The eyes, facial expressions, head tilts.
Then I suppose we'll meet again.
Next came one of the most difficult challenges, creating a scene with an open pistol holster. Eventually, I realized it was easier to let VEO decide what the holster and pistol should look like, rather than trying to prompt every detail myself. I wasted a lot of time trying to get it right using Flux Context, even tried Photoshop. But VEO did a great job on its own. It drew the pistol itself and showed how the holster looked. After many attempts to generate the holster and a pistol reaching toward it, I finally succeeded. We're able to convincingly grab the gun with their hands, as if preparing for battle. Next was the tension building scene. Close-ups of eyes staring at a fixed point, crafted ahead of time in Flux Context. These were extreme close-up shots of the eyes, sometimes slightly cropped, other times just widened to frame better. Then came the actual shootout, spread across several shots. It took many tries to make the pistol extraction look clean. Most of it was solved during editing, by trimming excess frames and speeding up the pulling motion. That's the essence of it. Instant gunfire and a fall into emptiness. That fall into the void was heavily driven by sound design. We'll talk more about that shortly. Then came a series of exposition shots, focusing more on the setting itself. The meaning here was that after a shootout, destruction is always left behind. The city was already dead to begin with. They met in a dead city, but I wanted to underline that decay. Here's the snake shot. There's a bit of morphing, but I decided it was fine as is. Then comes the scene with the character lying on the ground. It took some time to write the right prompt for how he was supposed to lie there. Again, pay attention to how well VEO understands performance when the prompt is written thoughtfully. And there's our crow, sitting, looking into the camera, letting out a single caw. Our villain has now become a kind of mythical figure. That was the callback from the beginning, the one crow that was sitting on the rooftop. And then our hero's final phrase.
Seems like we are gonna meet again, Jack.
The phrase was clearly written into the prompt, and I added a note to emphasize the R word. Seems like we are gonna meet again, Jack. It was very important for me to convey that emphasis, and VEO nailed it. I'm still in awe of how beautiful and responsive VEO and directing actor performance. Then comes the scene with the crow, a rather large crow since it's meant to be mythical, flying off into the distance. Here I extended the shot twice in Scene Builder using VEO2. I simply wrote that the crow continues flying and the camera follows it. And the scene ends with a fade to black.
This is where we can start talking about creating a main audio theme of this short film. The part I personally had the most fun doing.
I asked ChatGPT to come up with a prompt that matches the spirit of the script, resemble Wild West vibe as much as possible, with a raw, torn-up riff guitar. I had a very specific feeling I wanted the music to evoke, something that kicks in right when the main character enters the scene. After generating the initial prompt, I ran a few generations and listened. As I began to notice what direction I liked, I refined the prompt even more. I added specifics, that torn, distorted guitar, a sharp transition, because I wanted the gunfight to hit hard, like a ripping guitar riff exploding through the speakers. At some point, I stumbled upon a version whose rhythm and melody I liked. After testing it in DaVinci with footage I liked it yet missed the depth, so I remixed that melody, added a prompt to make it even more grand, more intense. Suno remixed the generated track into a stunning composition. I had 2 or 3 versions, but I chose one that hit hardest for me. Then I slightly adjusted the pacing of the story to match the vibe. It had that slow-burning, Wild West feeling, a timeless conflict. Eventually, I had a working remix. And then, one day on the walk, the lyrics came to me. At first, the track had no lyrics at all, but magic happens, and that same day, Suno released version 4.5+, which allowed inserting lyrics at specific parts of the song. So I calculated the exact moment the gunfight started. By then, I had already assembled the first half of the film, and I realized this is the perfect moment to add lyrics. Lyrics that would help deepen and expand the story. I decided to continue telling the story not just visually, but musically. I wrote the lyrics, noted what kind of voice I wanted in the prompt, highlighted the section of the track where I wanted to insert the lyrics, and wrote out the lines and vocal description in Suno Editor. After a few generations, one of the outputs struck me deeply. So much so that I was genuinely moved.
I met the devil. I met the devil. Oh, I met the devil. And the devil set me free. Set me free.
I added to the track, downloaded the full audio, and replaced the previous version. The lyrics fit the mood perfectly. I absolutely loved it. Adding those words pulled everything together. From that moment on, the second half of the editing process was driven almost entirely by the music. I really wanted to give that slow exposition of town, the character that spoke between the song lyrics, and the bird flying off at the end with Set Me Free lyrics. I enjoyed this process a lot.
Of course, there is more to the sound than background music. Let's check out the sound design section.
I started adding a bit of sound design. As you can hear at the very beginning, there's the sound of Rusty Windmill, generated from VO. I decided to repeat it throughout the whole movie, as this rusty windmill is somewhere nearby. It became a kind of base layer of ambient noise. I downloaded a wind sound from Epidemic Sound, though you can use any other source, the sound of howling desert wind. With that, the ambient sound of deserted city was enough for me. A rusty windmill humming in the background, and the wind howling quietly. Then I started adding sound for specific shots, especially in shots that were generated with VO2 as it had no sound. Initially, I had many more shots in mind, like the hero walking around town and then meeting the villain. But I ended up simplifying the whole thing. Instead of complex sequences, I just used those leftover sounds of footsteps, the character walking across dry sand and gravel. It turned out to be a great fit for adding the crunch of his footsteps into the sound mix. I created a faint whistle and 11 labs to mark the entrance of the main character. I also added a riser effect to build tension right before the shootout. Some of those risers were generated with 11 labs, others were taken from Epidemic Sound, like this quiet heartbeat to amplify tension. Just small risers to amplify the suspense before the shootout. The key part of the sound design was built around those few quick gunfire cuts. Then we hear birds and crows flapping away in panic. Frightened birds take off. We don't see them, but we hear them. And we know the gunfire just happened. And that's basically it for the sound design. A very minimalistic scene once again. The sound design process happened fairly quickly. The minimalism worked.
At this moment, I realized that without a proper aspect ratio, this will not be a Western-style short film. So let's go on and change it.
Initially, I built everything in 16:9, since all the image generations and animations were made in that format. But then I decided I wanted to go for that cinematic look, the CinemaScope format, also known as 2.39:1. Using ChatGPT, I calculated the correct resolution for that ratio and created a new timeline. Starting from 1920 pixels in width, since that matched the original generation settings, I reframed all the shots to fit the new format. That gave me extra space to add some light camera animation. For example, a slow upward movement on the windmill shot. There was also a slight lift when the character entered the scene, where the camera subtly moved up as well. This reframing added breathing room to the shots, and I really liked how things looked in ultra-wide format. It made the eyes of the characters feel even more focused and immersive, like they were fully framed within the shot. I wasn't worried about the resolution, because I knew I'd be upscaling the footage later anyway.
This is where I was happy with the edit, and it was about time to spice things up with proper 4K upscaling using Astra.
I moved on to upscaling in Astra. Since I wanted to understand what works best for each specific shot, I exported all the individual shots from DaVinci Resolve and ran them one by one through Astra's upscaling. That way, I could evaluate how well each shot looked after upscaling. Once I finished that, I created a new 4K timeline in DaVinci Resolve and began replacing all the original shots by layering in the upscaled 4K versions on top. There were a few moments where I needed correction, because creative upscaling sometimes introduced artifacts on character faces. For example, look at this. Here's an ugly-looking defect on the character's face in the original. It looked really unpleasant and distracting, so I decided to fix it. I fixed those by creating additional nodes in the color grading section and using patching tools. As you can see here, I had this little track patch object set up. I replaced part of the skin texture, and in the final result, the defect became much less noticeable. I also corrected a few more issues on the main villain's face, because there were some unwanted details that drew too much attention. And that's it. After completing this final correction phase on the upscaled 4K footage, I finished the editing. The final cut was now complete, with all the polished, upscaled scenes in place. I didn't want to add any color correction above it. I only added a title with a slight fade-in animation in the beginning.
And here comes the final step, creating the cover of the short film.
Initially, I wanted to make something classical in Wild West style, with bold typography and cowboy illustrations, but quickly realized it will not look any good. So I played around with double exposure prompts with a crow as a main symbols and both heroes present inside the crow, as well as abandoned Wild West city. Along the way, I also prompted for the logo with the short film title, and I immediately liked it. ChatGPT was stubbornly giving me extra instances of characters on the image, no matter how much I prompted not to do it. So I took the most prominent picture and went with it into Weavy. I added painter mask on the third head, added SD3 in paint, which worked well for me most of the time, and prompted for a Wild West city. It drew this two cowboys on horses, which I liked. I later merged it all together in the Photoshop. And that's about it for the cover design. So these were the full steps in the workflow for creating this specific 3-minute short film.
I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to learn more about any part of the process, let me know in the comments, and I see you in the next video.
I